All right, so let's get back into this Matt Stafford deal and kind of the implications of it, because there was a lot of way this was framed out in the public about what the Broncos were ultimately trying to do. It was framed as though the Broncos came to the Lions with hey, we'll trade you Drew Lock, we'll trade you all these players, where you're reporting quite the opposite. They came to the Lions talking about draft picks, swapping a first and third for a second and Stafford. Mm-hmm. And the Lions countered with, no, we're not giving you any draft picks. You will give us the draft picks, and we want all of these players, Drew Lock, Jerry Jeudy, et cetera. So I think that's an important distinction because, like I said, it's being framed right now as though the Broncos are actively shopping their starting quarterback on this roster.
And they're not.
That is not really the case. And now what's important here is whether that's being reported by media or fans or whatever. What's important here is that the organization can keep at least that portion of the continuity of that portion intact, because you do have to worry just a little bit about the ego here of your quarterbacks. So people out there, I think, are kind of framing this like, well, you're already in on the quarterbacks. You have to go all in. You have to make that move. You have to go get Deshaun Watson. You have to go be in a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo or Kirk Cousins or any of these quarterbacks that are out there. But the fact is, they don't necessarily have to do that as long as they weren't the ones actively shopping him. I think they can keep this intact.
Yeah. And I think
is that weird logic, or do you kind of follow me on that?
No, I know what you're saying. And you're trying not to hurt Drew Lock's feelings, basically, is what, because then if you have to revert to him, then what,
Well, that's right. And that's a big deal, because if you miss out on all these things.
I don't think you're reverting to him. I think he's the guy unless you're able to bring in something. And so that's like.
Yeah, but if you're involved in all these trades, like if you're out there.
Though. That's the thing. It's bad reporting out here. It's bad reporting from people that are getting information secondhand that don't know what they're talking about. And so that's what we're trying to clear up here. Do I think that the Broncos would let go of Drew Lock in a Deshaun Watson type of deal? Yes. Do I think the Broncos feel like they're going to be in on Deshaun Watson? No. I don't think that. I think they don't have the ammo to compete for that. And I think that they think that they're not willing to give up what other teams are. Now, are they going to play the market there just to see? Sure.
You got to make the call.
And you should. You're remiss in your duties as a general manager if you're not exploring every option. But that doesn't mean you just do it just to do it. You're not giving up Justin Simmons and Bradley Chubb and 3 first-round draft picks and a pair of second-round draft picks and probably Draymond Jones on top of it. There'd be another player. You're not giving that up, because at that point, what's the point of bringing it? If you gut your defense, Deshaun Watson just played with a bad defense. They won, 4 games? He just played with a bad defense and a bunch of young and no talent. We already showed that he can't win without having some of that stuff.
Yeah, and you have to understand,
He's good, but he needs those things to win.
But what you generally utilize your first and second and into your third round picks, those are starters. Those are projected starters. That's what you draft them that high to be.
Right.
So you're in that scenario, it's 2 to 3 players that are already starters on this roster. Mm-hmm. And then you're moving on from future starters, especially if you're talking about a defense that right now really needs an injection of youth. It needs an injection of depth. And you're going to be completely crushing that if you decide to make this deal.
Well, that's the part that I think people don't understand. I think people don't understand that George Payton's staring down the barrel of a defensive rebuild. Okay? Bouye's probably not going to be back. KJ's 32 years old. We expect Justin Simmons back, but that's not 100%. Bryce Callahan's got 1 year left on his deal and hasn't been super reliable. Von Miller's nearing the end. Then you start looking down the defensive line. Purcell just got the new deal, but that deal is probably going to be his last deal. You don't know if you're going to get Shelby back. Jarrell Casey's probably gone. Alexander Johnson's an RFA, and then are you going to pay him after that? Because he's 30-something years old. I mean, he's young, but he's, they need to upgrade over at Josie's side. So, really you got Bradley Chubb and some rookie corners.
And a few defensive line prospects.
Right. Draymond looks like he could be something.
Yeah. But you didn't really get a chance to see McTelvin Agim, who was a third rounder last year.
But you get the point here. You're staring down the barrel of a defensive reload, and George Payton knows that. And I think the fans don't, because they become so accustomed to the Broncos defense just being good, and John Elway's penchant to plug-and-play free agents, that I think that they're not understanding the direction that this thing is headed, which is you go ahead and you bring in a Foles or a Minshew or maybe a Dalton. I don't think he winds up in Washington, but we'll see. You bring somebody like that in that has starter experience, that's been somewhere before. Dalton's been to the playoffs. Foles won a Super Bowl. that could push you just a little bit. But you have to be sure on the quarterback because you've got that defensive reload and rebuild that you've got to do. You've got to be sure on the quarterback. And so are you really going to throw everything at Matt Stafford where, in the end, this guy's been injured a little bit and hadn't done anything despite having weapons in Detroit. Are you going to roll the dice on an unsure thing like Justin Fields or Zach Wilson or, heaven forbid, Trey Lance?
How should George Payton view this offense currently? Like the
a point guard away.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And whether that's lock or not, a point guard away. And if there's a name out there, for me, like if you're the Broncos and you're looking for a quarterback, you're not looking to trade because you've got to give up assets, right? If you're looking for something, you're desperately hoping Dallas and Dak can't get anything done. That's the one. Because then you don't have to give up assets. You just got to pay the man. And so in that scenario, all of a sudden, you're looking better off because you don't have to shed salary to accommodate. Like with Deshaun, you got to trade away stuff. Then you got to shed salary to accommodate his deal and go from there. So it's a lose on both sides. I mean, yeah, you get Deshaun Watson, but in the end, you're going to lose on both sides of the deal. If you bring in Dak in, you just got to pay him. You didn't have to give up any draft picks. And you got to figure out the salary shed situation at that point, but it's virtually the same.
In that perspective, it feels like the Broncos might be attractive at that level for that kind of quarterback. Say, listen, man, the offensive line is going to be mostly returning here with a Hall of Famer coaching him. Mm-hmm. We're going to have Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Noah Fant, Cortland Sutton as the nucleus of receivers, not to mention we have a guy that's a former Pro Bowler, a couple Pro Bowlers if you bring back Phillip Lindsay, Melvin Gordon. And, right there, the offense is, as you mentioned it, kind of missing its point guard at that point. And again, this isn't to say that Drew Lock can't one day be that guy, but it allows you the fact, if you say go get Dak Prescott, it allows you the fact that you can keep Drew developing behind him. Dak is your starter. And then, you give Drew, hey, you have to be ready to play at any point because you look at a guy that just came off of injury. There may be a point you have to come in.
Coming up.
When you have an elite guy that's coaching one side of the ball, he gets the best out of the players regardless of the level of talent.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
I want to throw something at you that I've seen on Twitter, and again, we're going to get to the Senior Bowl stuff here in a little bit. I want to throw something that was kind of floating around on Twitter about the defense and maybe not needing to assign so many high-end players to it. So, for example, if you were going to have to trade multiple starters in order to acquire a quarterback, is there something to the fact that Vic Fangio still got this team to I think it was 13th in DVOA, like one of the top-tier defenses considering all the players he's missing. So basically what I'm trying to say is kind of like we say with the other elite coaches, but even Mike Munchak is an example. When you have an elite guy that's coaching one side of the ball, he gets the best out of the players regardless of the level of talent. So, yes, if he had great players, he would take them to another level, but he's going to give you a baseline of performance on the defensive side of the ball, regardless of who's out there. Think about all the guys they were missing. I mean, we talked about it a ton, but think about all the guys they were missing, and yet they were still 13th in DVOA. Are you kidding me?
You were missing 8 starters. You were down to CB 8, 9, and 10.
Incredible. That is incredible. That is incredible coaching there.
It is, absolutely. I think it's a testament. I think this year only strengthened the resume of Vic Fangio.
Agreed. I mean, yes,
I
understand.
You had all those nerds out there trying to fire him and stuff, and that was just ridiculous. But around the league, you talk to people. And that was one of the things that this week I actually did get a chance to talk to some people, and that's so they said, why are you always talking about these fans that want to fire Vic Fangio? What kind of fan base do they have up there in Denver right now? And these are people from other teams. They don't have a dog in the fight. So it was kind of funny, and it's refreshing, honestly, sometimes to get out of the bubble and go talk to people from other teams and see what they think. Opinion's pretty split on Drew Lock. There are guys that are like, yeah, man, he's got the tools. If he can, if he just puts it all together, that dude's going to be a stud. And there are other guys like, that guy stinks.
Yeah, and especially the draft nicks. I mean, a lot of the draft analyst people that I talked to, it was a completely mixed bag.
Right.
Whether or not, and some of them were holding on to what their assessment of Drew Lock was back when he was drafted a couple of years ago, and they're like, yeah, he's a project quarterback with iffy feet, and he really hasn't changed my mind on that. So I understand why they're doing that. But not one of them, and I mean not one of them, were down on Vic Fangio. In fact, like you pointed out, most of them were lauding Vic Fangio. When we were out there in Mobile, most of them were lauding him. Like, do you realize how good that defense performed? They were the number one defense in the red zone without Von Miller
starters.
Yes, without all of these studs. And then by the end of the year, the fact that he had that team competing, and and most of them pointed to that Chiefs game as a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
So, many of them came up to me.
That might be the blueprint for Pat Mahomes.
Yes.
That might be it. You kind of took what the Raiders did and you turned it into something that's viable, and now let's see if anybody can actually execute it.
Right.
Because right after that, the Dolphins came out and tried to attack him and got the doors blown off him.
So back to the point, the question here that is kind of being floated about is if you have to move some of these defensive players in order to make a run at some of these quarterbacks or do something along those lines, don't you at least for a moment say, well, Vic Fangio can do a lot with very little on that side of the ball because he's one of the elite minds of the defense.
And while I sort of agree with that, the problem is you're already staring a reload in the face, and now you're going to give up the players that you have in place and the assets that you would have to replace them. And that's where I have the problem. Because the only way you're going to be able to solve that then is to overspend in free agency. Well, you can't do that. You just brought on a quarterback with a huge contract. So unless you're getting rid of big money contracts, it's just not.
Well, you're going to move on probably from Jarrell Casey and AJ Bouye. I mean, but there's
no guaranteed money in there. So
no, that's true. That's a good point.
Like
but they're not going to be on your cap.
Right,
they're going to be gone.
But that's, I mean, again, you're talking about.
They don't count to your cap right now.
Right. That's the thing. That's a zero sum. Net thing. You'd have to move on from big money. You'd have to move on from Von Miller, and it precludes re-signing Justin Simmons.
Yeah, see, I'm not quite on the same page with you on that, but I feel like that there's always a way to work that out cap-wise. I mean, we just watched that the Chiefs did. They basically brought in whoever the heck they wanted.
They have a lot of cash, and that cash makes things. The Broncos are not a cash-heavy team. They're just not. I don't want to say they're poor because that's not true. Anytime you're a multi-billion-dollar organization, you're not poor. But you have to have liquid cash to do stuff like that. The Broncos have been without a naming rights deal for a few years. Now they couldn't get fans in the stands this year because of COVID. So you're a team that doesn't have as much cash on hand. Guaranteed money has to be put in escrow 2 weeks after the deal is signed. All of the guaranteed money has to be put into escrow. All of it. So, if you're signing a deal, you got to have $40, $50 million liquid to be able to put, for Justin Simmons, to be able to put into escrow.
They're going to want to do that, but I see your point. If you're already doing one of those deals, if you're bringing in a pretty big contract, like, say, Deshaun Watson's.
The guaranteed money's got to be in escrow.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. It's just, it's easier for some teams to pencil whip the cap than it is for others. Stan Kroenke, who is making it rain on out there in L.A. For some reason, he won't. He doesn't want to spend as much around here in Denver, but he certainly wants to spend out there in L.A. That's what he's doing. A lot of cash on the front end for signing bonus stuff that you can use in that first year to get out from under that cap stuff. It helps you down the line, gives you flexibility. That's how they've been able to do it without the first rounders and by keeping it. The Eagles, same thing, cash flush team. Dallas Cowboys, cash flush team. Broncos aren't in that. Broncos, the Chargers, the Raiders, they're at a disadvantage in their own division because they're three teams that are not as cash flush as the Kansas City Chiefs.
Coming up.
All right, so the Senior Bowl, the game happened on Saturday. We were out there for the course of the week. I thought we kind of just pick and choose a few guys that jumped out to us. We can kind of go through a little bit of the rosters and what we thought was a kind of interesting.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, so the Senior Bowl, the game happened on Saturday. We were out there for the course of the week. I thought we kind of just pick and choose a few guys that jumped out to us. We can kind of go through a little bit of the rosters and what we thought was a kind of interesting. Let's start with the national team because they were the one that usually practiced in the morning. Let's get to the inside linebackers. Because there's a couple of guys I want to highlight. So the national team, they had the Ohio State trio, right? You had Justin Hillard, you had Tuff Borland,
and then
Baron Browning.
The man, Baron Browning.
Which is a dude, by the way, that could line up at outside linebacker if you really wanted him to. I think he has some versatility as either a pass rusher or can play on the inside. But if I'm the Broncos and I'm intent on getting an inside linebacker, I'm 100% looking at two guys, and this will be on day 2 more than likely. And so you're looking at either Baron Browning or you're looking at what was number 9? No, 19 is what I'm thinking of. Jabril Cox out of LSU for the American team. So Jabril Cox and Baron Browning for me stood out above all the rest when it comes to the inside linebackers and the guys that you'd want to add to this team.
Yeah, I thought they both had great weeks. I came in liking Baron Browning. Cox, though, as soon as you watch him, the speed was maybe a tick different. You kind of look at him, you see he's just a better athlete. Overall, that's not taking anything away from Browning, but I think Cox is a better athlete. Probably goes a little higher in the draft. But I would be fine with either one of those guys here. Put him next to Alexander Johnson, man. You got a tough duo there.
The guy that I was really excited to watch during the course of the week was Levi Ozarike, and he only got the one day, but he did have a good first day. He was one of those guys where you kind of knew that he was more – he was coming off of an opt-out year. You kind of knew that he was going to have an opportunity early on in the practice week. If he got a little banged up, which it seemed like he did, he was likely going to rest. He's a top 100, maybe even borderline top 50 kind of player. There were some people out there that thought he could be the best defensive lineman, the best interior defensive lineman in the draft. I don't think he necessarily put himself in that tier, but for me, a no doubt top 50 play. So if you're thinking about a defensive lineman for the Broncos, right when they get to the turn there at the second round, Levi Ozarike, and then Dalen Hayes is another guy that I thought really impressed and moved up his draft stock.
Yeah, Ozarike I liked. Hayes I didn't get to watch as much. I'm trying to think.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think. Who's the kid from Pittsburgh? I wanted to mention him. I thought he looked. His name escapes me at the moment.
Are you talking about Patrick Jones?
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't get a chance to see Hayes as much.
Hayes had that one spectacular day. He didn't. I don't think he did much in the third day, but the second day he had a couple of shed blocks for TFLs, and then he also had a strip sack.
That's right. That's
on
where
the
I remember
quarterback
from, is the strip sack. Yeah, no, I didn't get as much chance to watch him as I would have liked. So that's one I have to put a pin in and take your word for it.
A couple of guys that absolutely impressed. If you're looking for offensive tackle, I know we're kind of jumping all over the place here, but we're just kind of going over some of the guys that are in my notes here. Daniel Radins.
Yeah.
I know
North Dakota State.
Yeah, I know you're a huge fan. He might have had one of the best weeks at offensive tackle out there. Of course, you already have Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama. He's going to be, if not a first rounder, then right there in the conversation. But this is a dude that, again, kind of put himself in position to be a top 100 player and ended up being one of the highlighted offensive tackles of the week out there. And usually, again, with those awards, those usually go to the players based on what everybody else went against him. So the defensive line got to vote on the offensive line, and his name came up.
Yeah, again, lots of talent there. Guys we came in liking, as far as it goes. I don't know the Broncos need offensive linemen. You look at what they've done the last couple of years. They pretty much got that shorn up. You got Bowles, Reisner. You got a third-round pick in Cushenberry. If he doesn't work out, you're going to kick Glasgow inside. You got Moody, who looked good enough to take over the right guard spot there. The right tackle's a big question mark, but you got a bunch of money in Juwan James. And then you got two other guys over there that are intriguing in Elijah and Calvin. So, I don't really know what the offensive line is going to be something they pay a lot of attention to in the draft this year.
Okay, corner. Defensive backs, already know where I'm going to go with this.
Right, we're both going to go the same place. If you're a Broncos fan, you need to be watching that tape because that's K-Jack 2.0. That's the replacement for Kareem Jackson right there.
Yeah, Richie Grant out of UCF, and he highlighted his final practice day with 2 interceptions, but he played great the entire week. Just an absolute game-changing kind of player. And that's one of the things we had Steve Atwater on last week talking about Richie Grant, and I asked him, and he went to the cons first, but then when he went to the pros, he's like, look, man, this guy is a game changer. Like that's what he does. He makes plays out there.
Yeah, that was the thing. I was this morning. I was talking with our buddy James Palmer over there at the NFL Network, and he's like, "Yeah, we must be talking to the same people because everybody here is buzzing about Grant and how he could be a replacement for Kareem Jackson. He just kind of has that fit. He's willing to hit. He's got that kind of corner build, but he's willing to hit. He's a ball hawker back there too, and how much of a great fit he would be here. So." He was one of those guys who's by the time the end of the week rolled around, I can't stop raving about the guy enough. I think you came into the week liking him. Melifonwu, my guy, I thought he played pretty well. I thought he played really well.
And he offers versatility because he can be a corner, and they lined him up at corner almost the entire time.
Right, he can do both. But I think I talked to some people. And it's funny enough in the division with the Raiders, and they were very smitten with him. As a corner too. So, he's a guy who's going to have plenty of suitors, Melifonwu, and that would make sense because his brother, I believe, played for the Raiders briefly. Obi Melifonwu. So, I think he's just got that length, and if you're going to run a cover 3 defense like they're going to run, or a cover 4 defense, you got to have that kind of length to take away those passing lanes. So,
speaking of guys with length, Hamza Naziruddin out of Florida State, a lot of people were really excited to see him. And you saw the athleticism, you saw the length. I didn't think it was a particularly great week from him, but it doesn't necessarily change kind of where I find him, because he's coming off of an ACL 2019, late in 2019. He got in some playing time in 2020, only a couple of games. He showed some flashes. And ultimately with him, it would be, okay, can you get him on day 3, which is more likely the case. Right. And if that's the case, you bring him in, and because of his length and athleticism, and you let him just learn the position and learn what it's like. But for Vic Fangio, Hamza Naziruddin would be a lot of fun, I think, in this defense, because I think Vic Fangio could kind of make him positionless in a lot of ways.